Hey there everybody, DevBiker here, and today I'm going to take you through using iCUE's functionality for system monitoring and especially logging. But first, why would we do this? As long as nothing overheats, right? Who cares? Well, yeah, there is some truth to that. But me, I like to tinker. I like to make sure that everything on my system is running cool and as well as it can. And I'll play around and I'll tweak with different fan curves, trying to balance the noise and the cooling performance. And being the geek that I am, um, I like to go back and analyze and further refine and tweak. So I'm always playing with it. It's kind of a never-ending process. Fortunately, iCUE makes that pretty easy for me to do. So let's take a look at a couple of things in iCUE before we get started. So right here, what we see here is the home screen for the Commander Pro. And you can see that I've named all of my fans and all of my sensors. I give them custom names. Um, and I definitely recommend that you do this as well. It's a lot more meaningful than having them say like fan number 1, fan number 2, and temp 1 and temp 2. It lets me know exactly what it is. I have to spend a little time to figure out exactly where they are, or kind of write them down when I'm putting the system together. But it works out pretty well, and I can look on the screens and see where everything is. So I definitely recommend that you go in there and rename these things. And to do that, it's pretty easy. You just double click on the box, and it comes into this edit screen. You can go ahead and type in a new name and be done with it. You'll also see over here, right, I have the 4 temperature sensors that are included with the Commander Pro, and I have them connected in different places in my case. I really recommend that you do this if you have a Commander Pro. We see a lot of folks on the forum that have the Commander Pro, but they're not using these, and I'm not really sure why. But it's definitely one of the coolest features of the Commander Pro. And it's not the only thing that does it, right? If you look at some of the higher end motherboards that are out there these days, from Asus, MSI, ASRock, Gigabyte, they all kind of do this, right? You'll see similar functionality. They'll have connectors for temperature sensors. On the Commander Pro, it actually uses the same temperature sensors. They're called 10K thermistors that you can use with your motherboard. The package comes with 4 of them, but if you happen to lose them, they're only about $7 or $8 out on Amazon. You can plug them in. If if you have a custom loop, right, and you've got all that going on, you can actually get these embedded in different fittings, so that way they'll give you the actual temperature of the coolant. So if you take a look at these, right, I have temperature sensors in mid case, and we'll kind of see where that is. Lower case, so that's like at the bottom of my case, that's like the lowest, really the coolest temperature in the entire case. The rad exhaust and the rad intake, so that's on the front and back of the radiator. The mid case is actually the one that I look at the most, and I actually use to control my fan curves, because that one's pretty heavily impacted by my GPU. You might have also noticed on the previous screen that I named the devices as well, right? So if you looked at the iCUE home screen, this was named CoPro. If you see me on the forums, I'm always calling these CoPros because Commander Pro is a lot to type and it's a lot to say, and I'm lazy. So this was a new feature in, I think, iCUE 3.8, maybe 3.7, something like that. But you could come in here, and if you switched that menu tray for your devices to text mode, you can then double click on the device and give it a new name, right? So I could, if I wanted to, come back and call this Commander Pro, which is the default, right? All in caps, and I just found that really obnoxious, right? So I'm just going to take that and put it back to CoPro, because that makes me happy. And it's always all about making me happy, right? So right here in the iCUE interface, one of the first things that you'll see is that we have the graphing tab. And you'll see this on a bunch of different devices. And what it does is it shows you a time graph of different settings and different values. And it flaked out on me just a little bit. That happens every once in a while. And you'll see that as we select different values, it shows them. Now, when you look at the graph, you can come up here and you can change what the time scale is, right? So you can get a very small view, quickly moving for 1 minute. You can move it out to 5 minutes, all the way out to 30 minutes, and it moves real slow. You can see, recently my radiator exhaust started going up. That's kind of interesting. Now this is good for kind of getting a broad stroke view of kind of what's going on with a particular sensor or particular value. Um, but the graph doesn't necessarily show you, right? So we've got 30 minutes here, but I can probably figure out, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So eight hashes for 30 minutes. So that would be, yeah, so it's something crazy, right? It doesn't tell you exactly what time it was that started happening. So there's a limit to the usability, but it's really good. And I'll come in here and I'll play with this a lot. Like if I'm tweaking around trying to see what the impact is of changing certain speeds will be. So that's the graphing tab. Over here, oh, before I forget, right over here, these values here are the max and the minimum for the chart itself. They're not the max and minimum values that have been recorded. So the other thing that you have in here is the dashboard, right? So everybody, I'm sure, has used the dashboard. I actually use this quite a bit too. It's really good to get a high-level overview of what's going on with the system. You have some nice little charts to kind of give you, really just a 50,000 foot view of what's going on. So you can see all of your different fan speeds. You can add different items in here, right? You click this plus sign, the system info, right? You'll see that I have the motherboard and I have the chip in there. I could actually add the HD graphics if for some reason I wanted to, right? So this is going to be your system info. You can add them in here. Individual groupings, right? You can increase the size of them or decrease the size of them depending on how important they are to you and what you want to see. You can also come in here and hide the graphs. So this just shows you the numbers, no pretty graphs. The graphs themselves are okay. However, they don't tell you what the time scale is for the graph, so you don't really know. You don't really know what the min or max is for the graph. So you can see something, you can see a sensor, for example, that may not have a lot of variability, but it may look like it's changing a lot because it, it doesn't have a very wide range, right? Whereas you have something else with a lot of variability, and it looks like it's relatively smooth because it does have a very wide range, right? And you can't see those details here. So there's some limits to the usefulness of the dashboard. That said, I very commonly run iCUE with the dashboard open. It's right there. It's kind of the main thing that I look at and I keep open because it lets me kind of very quickly glance over and see where everything is and see what's going on, and gives me the opportunity to make any adjustments or whatever that I may need to make. So now that we've taken a look at what's directly available in iCUE, let's take a look at really what the best tool is that we have for in-depth analysis of temperatures, fan speeds, and the like. And that's the logging functionality that you have in iCUE. So if we come over here into settings, you'll see over here there's this sensor tab called sensor logging. Sensor tab. Right? Now, there's a tab called sensor logging. Right? Clicking on that will allow you to configure logging, and what it will do is actually take a log and create a CSV for you in a folder that you specify. So that's what's going on right here. right? And it will add values at a particular interval that you specify here. So I'm gonna turn that down to say 3 seconds. The shorter the interval, of course, the more work that's going to have to do, the bigger the log file is going to be, but also the more granular the information is, right? So how long this is going to be is really going to depend on what you're trying to do, what you want to do, and what you want to look at, and over what period of time, right? So if you're logging this for, say, 30 minutes or 45 minutes, get a finer, get a shorter logging interval. If you want to see kind of broad brush kind of patterns across an entire day, you'll want a longer logging interval, right? So it really depends on what you're going to do. If you want to limit the logging duration, right? So you want to say, when I start it, I want to log for the next 5 minutes, or I want to log for the next 30 minutes, right? Or the next 60 minutes. You can check that, and when the time's up, it'll stop the log. If you don't check that, right, and I'm going to leave it unchecked, once you hit start logging, it will continue logging, I believe even through reboots. It will continue logging until you come in here and you stop logging. So you need to make sure that you keep that in mind, because you don't want to fill up your entire hard drive, right, with log files because you started logging and forgot to stop it. So before we do hit start logging, though, we need to select which values we actually want to log, right? So over here on the left, we have a list box that has all the different values that we can log. And, fortunately, we have this guy right here, this combo box that lets us select. So I'm going to come into the CoPro, and I want the lowercase, midcase, exhaust, intake. And you know what? I'll do all of my fans, right? So I've got all of my fans, and you'll see that all of our custom names are here. So that's darn handy, right? We made those custom names, so now they show up, and we'll see where they are in other places too, right? And then I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to do my platinum cooler. I'm going to do the temp, and I'm going to do the fan speeds. And then I'll come in here to system, and in system I want the vCPU, I want the CPU package. Let's go ahead and include the load as well. And then I'm not sure why I have 2 GPU temps in there. That's a little weird. I'm going to grab, oh yeah, I know why, because one of them is the NVIDIA GPU and one of them is the Intel GPU. And unfortunately, it doesn't tell me which is which. So, how do I fix that? Let me come back here into my dashboard real quick. Dashboard. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this one 1080 Ti temp. There we go. And so let's come back here into settings, go back to sensor logging, right? And you'll see it remembered the stuff that I selected before. Go back to system. Here we go. And there we go, GPU 1080 Ti temp. Excellent. So now I can tell which one is which. So you'll notice, right? And I actually didn't plan that. I mean, that worked out really well, but I didn't quite plan for that to happen. Wherever you change these values, wherever you change the names, they will show up in other areas of the system. So I definitely, once again, recommend you you change those names. So now that I have all of these, and I can go back to all, and I can see everything that's in there, right? I can see all my what I have turned on and what I have turned off, and I don't think I need the HX 1200. Although, I don't know. Maybe power in, power out might be interesting, right? Kind of see how much power I'm consuming, if I care about that. So there we go. I've got everything set up, and what I want to do is I actually want to run a test to kind of see how my temperatures behave during, what is a pretty common load scenario. So, darn, I need to do some testing. I need to test, how my system heats up, how my GPU heats up, and how all that stuff is handled. So, I guess I have to go play some games. So I'm gonna start logging. I'm gonna go play some games, and we'll be right back. And afterwards, and I'll show you what we logged while we were playing games. Bye now. Hey everybody, I'm back, and as you can see, I've already opened up the log file here in Microsoft Excel. But before we get into the details of that, let me take a quick second and kind of give you an idea of where some of these temperature sensors are in my case. So, the temperature sensors that I have for the Commander Pro, I have the CoPro lowercase. And the CoPro lowercase is down towards the bottom of the case. That's typically going to be the lowest temperature inside my case. So I kind of use that as a baseline. Then we have the CoPro mid case. As I mentioned before, mid case is actually in the middle of the case, right? But it's right above the GPU. And so this one's particularly impacted by GPU temperatures, as we'll see. And I use this one really as kind of my key control variable for my fan curves. So that's one that we're going to be taking a look at. And then I also have over on my radiator, I have the radiator intake, which is between the fan and the radiator on the intake side. And then I have the radiator exhaust, which is, again, between the fan and the radiator, but on the exhaust side. So that's kind of where I have the different Commander Pro sensors that we're going to look at in my case. And with that, let's go ahead and get back to taking a look at this stuff in Excel. So here we are. We can see that we've got this Excel document. It actually saves it not in a native Excel format, but in comma separated values, or CSV. And that's going to open up natively in Excel. It'll also open up natively in really any spreadsheet software that you have. You can import it into databases. I mean, you can really do anything that you want with it. So it's pretty flexible. So let's take a look in here, right? And the first thing that we see in here, and this is that across the top, you see all the different sensor values. They actually use my custom names, right? So that's good. My custom names are in here, so that way they'll be kind of what I want them to be, and they'll have meaning to me when I do some further analysis. The other thing that you'll notice, and this is something that I find particularly annoying because it does make things difficult for analysis, is that the temperatures are all marked as degrees Celsius. And if you try and chart this, if you try and put this on a graph or a chart or what have you, it's actually not going to work so well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here, and I'm going to take that degree Celsius, right? And I'm going to copy it, and then I'm just going to do a Control H, which is find what? I'm going to find that degree Celsius. What am I going to replace it with? Nothing. And I'm just going to go ahead and replace all. And just that quick, 8,176 replacements were made in the document, and we no longer have that annoying degree Celsius, and we can go ahead and actually start charting these as temperatures and as numeric values, because that's where things start getting really interesting from an analysis perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with making a chart. We're going to come in here. I'm going to do insert, and I'm going to do this as a line chart. And we'll do this one, 2D line. And you'll notice Excel is actually pretty smart, right? So it figures out that I have this timestamp, and it puts that down as the values along the x-axis, and then it plots everything on the same y-axis. So before I go any further, let's go ahead and move this chart. I'm going to move it, oops, wrong button. I'm going to move this chart, not select data, move chart, and I'm going to do it as a new sheet. And we'll call this, we'll just leave it called chart 1. All right. So here we go. We see all the different things. We see a whole bunch of stuff going all over the place. You see, these are mainly my fan curves. I think down here, That's well, that's the HX 1200 power, right? So we see I got up to what, probably about 400 watts, right? I have a 1200 watt power supply. So that should give you an idea of probably how much power PCs actually typically use these days. So I have a 1080 Ti and I have an i7 7700K. I have RGB I've got RGB everywhere on this thing, right? And I'm still not even crossing 400 watts. So this HX 1200i that I have is really kind of overkill. But looking at this, right, it's really difficult for us to kind of see what's going on. All of the temperatures are kind of clustered down here and look like kind of just one big line. So the next thing we want to do is come in and actually select data. There's some stuff that we don't want to see on here. We just want to see temperatures, and we want to see fan speeds. So we do have to go into the select data. We also want to come in and we want to have the fan speeds on one axis, and we want to have the temperatures on a different axis. And the way we do that is we come in here and we select one of the temperatures. Right, so I'm not sure which one this is, right, but we'll go ahead and we'll say format data series, and we want to plot this on a secondary axis. Right, and you'll see there it goes. It actually starts putting it on. We've got this secondary axis over here, and we can go through and we can get all of our temperatures. Right, so that may have been the platinum temperature. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say I want a solid line, but I want it to be dashed. So I'm going to have all of my, I'm going to have all of my temperatures be dashed, so that way they're a bit different. And then I'm going to do this kind of across the board. I'm going to change the width to 1 point, so that way they're not quite so thick, right? Because we've got quite a bit of data here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and so where's some H15 plat temp, right? So I can click on it. Instead of trying to find it down here on the graph, I can click on it here and make the changes. So I'm going to make that 1 point, and I'm going to make it dotted, right? So there we go. And then, oh, it looks like I did the GoPro rad intake. And I'll go through and I will do all of these. So it'll take just a few minutes. And then I'm also going to come in here into the select data. So there's a couple of things that I'm really not interested in seeing on the chart. I don't want the vCPU. The range for it is really not going to let it make much sense either. I don't really need the power in and power out right now. And I can look at those. I can make other charts later. So let me go ahead and remove those. There we go. And let me go back to kind of getting this all formatted properly. Okay. So there we go. We have everything formatted, and we can actually see a couple of interesting things in here already. So if you take a look at the GPU fan, right? So that's this guy right here, right? So you can see the GPU fan was working pretty much throughout, but you'll notice that we have this dip right in here. So you see this dip? This right here, so this is the, one of these is going to be the mid-case temperature, right? So it's going to be one of the dotted lines. Let's zoom in a bit here, right? And so we can see that mid-case temperature right around here took a dip, right? and this took a dip at the same time, and I really didn't plan to do this, right? But it wound up. I was noticing that the that it was that the mid case was actually pretty warm, right? And if you take a look at this, right, you can see that it's 43, 40, and but I also noticed that one of my exhaust fans was a little bit slower than maybe it should be. And I had done that really on purpose because I didn't think that particular fan really made much of a difference in the internal case temperature um, and in exhausting the GPU heat. Well, it turns out I was wrong, right? Because during this, I was watching this, I was going, wow, this is kind of warm. So, this particular fan, right? So this is the LL top exhaust fan. That one was going pretty slow. So I said, so what's going to happen if I just set that to 100%? So I went ahead and set it to 100%, and you can see that as I set it to 100%, right? So we see that quick jump right here, right? So it goes from like down in here, around 900 RPM or something like that? Yeah, 900 RPM, and then jumps all the way up to, 1300, 1400 RPM, right? And as soon as that happens, right, you see this temperature drop. And you notice I kept it going, and I kept it at 100%, and you'll see that that temperature never really got back up to where it was, and it was also doing a better job, like during pauses in the game, as up between different matches in Overwatch, right? The GPU is not working so hard, so it's not putting off quite so much heat. So before different pauses in the game, you can also see that it was doing a slightly better job of getting rid of the heat when we had those quiet moments. Now, some of these other ones that you see, right, are other fans that are tied to that mid-case temperature, right? I mentioned to you that all of my fan curves are tied to that mid-case temperature, right? So when I ramp this fan up, because the mid-case temperature dropped, those all dropped as well, right? And so you'll see that, everything stayed a little bit slower, and everything, and the temperatures came down a bit. So this was actually interesting. It was completely unplanned. I did not plan to do this. But in going through, I can take a look and I can see that, hey, increasing the speed of that one particular fan has an impact on the overall thermal environment. So I went in and I modified that fan curve. I actually had that fan, set pretty low for a reason. I didn't want the noise, and I didn't think it made much of a difference. I learned doing this that it actually does make a difference, and now I can come back and analyze very closely the kind of difference that it made. Because I've changed the fan curve, the other thing I can do is go in and do another recording, do similar type activities, right? Spend some time playing some Overwatch, and go in and see what kind of impact that actually has on the cooling performance, right? And so the cool thing too, you'll notice here that because of the way I set up the axes, I have the fan speeds and RPMs over here on the left, and then I have the temperatures over here on the right, and you can see that they actually match up quite nicely, so that my fan curves and the fan speeds and the temperatures actually kind of stick together. So it makes it a pretty nice chart. And what we can do too, right? So this is a pretty detailed chart. It's got everything on it. Of course, now that we have this in Excel, we can slice it and dice it any way that we want. We can come in and we can make a chart very specifically of radiator-oriented temperatures, right? So I can come in here and I can go ahead and copy this, and let's create a copy, right? So this is copy of, it calls it what, chart 1, 2, right? So I'm going to come in here and then select data, right? And I will, let's let's maybe keep CPU package on there, but I'm going to take the GPU stuff off, right? I want to keep the H115i temperatures. I don't need these mid-case, but I do want the radiator, exhaust, and intake. I don't need the different CoPro fans. Right, here we go. And so I can use this one, and this is what, oh, that's my CPU package temperature, and that's not on the secondary axis? Okay, so let me put that on the secondary axis, right? So you'll see my CPU temperature. CPU package temperature, where is that? Is that this one right here? No. Yeah, okay, so it's up here. Right, I was gonna say, wow, it was in the 30s while I was playing Overwatch. Wow, that's really good. No, it's up here. It's kind of in the looks like it's in the 40 to 50 degree range, right? And you can come in here and you can do interesting things like a trend line, and in this case, I want to do like a moving average of 10 readings, right? And so it's gonna do what it did is it put a moving average in of 10 readings of my CPU temperature, right? So we see this here, and we see that I have a pretty nice, pretty even CPU temperature. Now, what's this one right here? So this is the push fan. This right here is the exhaust, so that's pretty steady. This one is what? The radiator intake. And then let's try and zoom in a little bit, right? Because these are getting a little close together. One of these right here is going to be the actual let's see. Let's look at the color. Rad exhaust, rad intake, CPU package. So plat temp, let's go ahead and format that data series. Let's make this one, instead of that brown, let's make this a bright red. Yes. And let's make this dashed so that we can see it. There we go. Now I can see it. It's nice and clear. So you'll notice here, this is my the temperature of my coolant, and you'll notice that just above it, sticking really, really, really close to it, is the temperature of the exhaust. So if you don't have a radiator that will actually give you the temperature of the coolant, the temperature of the exhaust air is actually a really, really, really good proxy for the coolant temperature. You'll see in most cases it is within about a half a degree of what the actual coolant temperature reads. And so you'll see that this handles pretty well. The coolant temperature kind of maxes out, right in the right around 34 or so, 33 and change, right? And then starts dropping off as soon as the load comes down. So what I did was when I exited the game, I actually kept the log running for a little bit. Because I wanted to see how the system behaved when load was removed, right? When I stopped playing the game, and how well it got rid of the heat once it was no longer generating significant amounts of heat. So overall, I think things went pretty well. My system reacts pretty consistently. I do not particularly like the mid case temperature getting up into the 40s, but there doesn't really seem to be much that I could do. When I had a 1070, a GTX 1070, it never really got that warm. But with the 1080 Ti puts off a good deal more heat, and so it does get much warmer. And I've had to readjust my fan curves and readjust kind of what the baseline temperatures were to deal with the extra heat that the 1080 Ti gives off. And using tools like this, being able to go in after the fact and really kind of narrow down and see very clearly what was going on and clearly what those temperatures were. Certainly, I look at the dashboard. I had it open on another screen and I would glance over it like in between matches and that kind of stuff. So I look at it. I absolutely look at it. But that doesn't give you really the complete picture of what a log file will give you. So with that, thanks for joining. Thanks for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. If you don't like it, I guess give it a thumbs down, or really just don't let me know. If you have questions or problems, I certainly encourage you to head on over to the Corsair forum at forum.corsair.com or the Corsair subreddit. Both of those are places where you can find myself, as well as other folks who have experience with the Corsair system and are willing to help you out with questions and any problems that you may have. So until next time, thanks for joining me. This is DevBiker signing out.